Welcome to the 30/30 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another show of the 30/30 Health Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Adam. Adam, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Guillermo. How are you?
Pretty good. Just, trying to get something done this weekend. I've been kind of lazy, still celebrating my birthday, just trying to take it slow.
Right. No, that's good. I think that everybody, especially in the medical field, needs at least one day just to, calm down and not study, not to do any sort of work. I don't think it should be seen as a negative thing if you're taking a day off, just because of how important rest is to the body and your mind. And, you just kind of I feel like, at least for me, if I can take one day off from studying, then I can hit the rest of the days really hard with the books.
This is actually a pretty good start to the show, talking about shift work and how in the medical profession, we tend to have shift schedules and how difficult it is for us to regulate things like insulin sensitivity and stress and all of that stuff, and how it's not out of the ordinary that, especially talking about medical professions, we put ourselves in the situation where we're working overnights or we're working 12-hour shifts. It's almost like counterintuitive. Have you ever had any shift work?
I personally have not had any shift work, but I have had multiple all-nighters studying for finals and whatnot, and I can tell you, just from that alone, you can feel the effects immediately.
It's really funny how within the student medical population, there's usually like two types of students. The students that say, leave nothing behind, I'm going to study all night, I'm going to just sacrifice for the next 4 or 5 years, and hopefully on the other side, I'm going to be able to recoup. And then usually there's the other type of medical student that is like, I'm just going to take it easy. I'm just going to, I know what I know. If I pass, I pass. And I was never able to have any sort of like chill moment during medical school. And I think like you're a lot like me and when it comes to that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely the one who's just kind of basically a sleeping bag in the library. And even when it does come to finals, even though you should know everything by that point, or you've managed your time well enough that it shouldn't be the stressful event, for whatever reason, it becomes this all-nighter type of thing where you're, still in medical school. You're essentially drinking from a fire hose with the amount of work that you do. You think you'll finish something, and then 2 days later you're back on the grind. So
I used to, whenever someone came in to visit as a prospective student, I would say, it's just like trying to learn everything related to human physiology in 4 years. And it's impossible. It's basically impossible to learn everything that needs to be learned about human physiology, because we're still learning. We don't do medicine, we practice medicine. And I am lucky enough that I have a girlfriend who, would help me out during those really stressful weeks during finals or during the milestone exams where we have to show our skills. But what are some of, as a student, Adam, what are some of your strategies to deal with pulling an all-nighter or sacrificing until the last second studying and then rebuilding yourself up, whether it's during breaks or maybe during weekends?
So if it comes to something like an all-nighter, generally I'll know that's going to happen, and I'll just kind of will through it and just say, what, I know this is going to happen. It's going to suck, but it's only one time. It's not like I'm doing this every single day. So I just brew up a nice big pot of coffee and hope for the best. And then for recovery strategies, just kind of, once everything's done and settled, just take it way down and just kind of relax, kick it back with some friends, or just, do absolutely nothing.
My strategy was hopefully to have some time off, and to recover and just grind through the 12 weeks and then try to make it to the next milestone. I really, really did really bad with sleeping and staying up late and waking up really early. I remember there was a time during between my third and fourth year where I ended up doing something really dumb. I took a selective class that lasted 2 weeks, and then I presented at one conference, and then I was doing some research during one of the weekends. So, no lie, I went 22 weeks in a row with a project every day, whether it was going to the lab and doing an experiment, or having to go to class, or having to present, or having every single day for 22 weeks, including weekends, I had something to do. So, towards the end of the 22 weeks, my girlfriend actually rented an Airbnb in Tucson, and she said, "We are leaving," and she abducted me, and we went for the weekend, and I just slept for like 2 days. I would wake up, watch a little bit football, and then go back to sleep. It was like 3 days of nothing but sleep. I was fried. So after that stretch, that's when I decided that I needed to pay more attention to my calendar.
And I think also one big tip for any sort of medical student out there, or someone who's just starting out, if you're a first year medical student, I think one thing that you should really prioritize is is your time management, so that you can have that one day where you can just not think about schoolwork. So, maybe Monday through Friday is sort of like your, or even Monday through Saturday is sort of your, just hunker down and get the work done. So that this way, Sunday, you can take that whole day off and kind of, just relax your mind and sort of prevent that burnout sensation that you might get later on in the term. Because last term, I kind of went through something similar. For those 12 weeks, I just kind of, day in, day out, I was just kind of doing work. And then when the term finally ended, for, like you said, for 3 days, I was just kind of on my couch and like not moving and watching Netflix. And you definitely realize that the impact that it takes. And I'm striving now to just hunker down and stay in that library as long as I can every day to get the work done. So that this way I can have that day or two off and then, get back onto it.
And something that we see a lot, and I probably mentioned this before, is that one thing that I was really good about was around the most stressful times. I usually, try to keep my stressors that I can control to a minimum. And I try not to elevate those stressors when I'm worried with things that I cannot avoid, like, finals or traffic, or the things that you have to that you have to accept are going to happen. And for those 4 years at school, whenever I had finals, whenever I had something, that was very pressing, my diet would be very strict. And I've said this before. I hear people say, "Oh, I'm stressed out. I don't care what I'm going to eat." That's adding more stress to an already stressed body. That's not going to be good for you. So being able to control those things is going to be super important. When I was working at the in the emergency department doing 12-hour days, I never did an overnight. I never did an overnight. There was a little bit more money on the differential if you stayed overnight, but I was very careful never to have to sign up for one of those. I did a couple of times. They would ask me, "Hey, we're short. Can you stay an extra 4 hours?" So that 12-hour shift turns into a 16-hour shift. Instead of going 7 to 7, now you're going 7 to 11 p.m. And when that happened, I would make sure that the next day I didn't have to wake up at 7 in the morning again. And then I set up my schedule to do 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, and then every other weekend. And by doing that, since I was working every other weekend, twice a month, I would have 4 days in a row where I was completely off. If I did 3 12s in a row, I was completely done the next day. If I did four, don't even talk to me after I get home. There are people within the healthcare community that take advantage of these differentials and this, this availability of work, and they do, 7 in a row, or they do, months staying on at night, and then maybe picking up a shift here and there. And you always notice that the people that are doing this are usually the people that thrive on tons of caffeine and tons of Red Bulls and energy drinks and things like that. It worries me because with just one night of sleep deprivation impacts your insulin sensitivity, and then for the next 24 hours you're pretty much type 2 diabetic. So whatever you eat is not going to have the same impact as if you were well rested. There's a saying out there that oh, you carve your abs with a spoon. But I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate the sleep, because if you're not sleeping and your cortisol levels are constantly elevated, you're going to have water retention, you're going to have stress, your glucose regulation is going to be downregulated to try to keep as much glucose in your blood to try to feed your tired brain, because you haven't had a chance to go to bed and sleep. So if your goal is to try to lose some weight, we always talk about diet first. I think we need to start talking about diet and having good sleep patterns. And then that's when you start seeing progress, and that's when you start seeing all the pieces falling into place. I know it sounds really basic, and I know a lot of people talk about sleep, but we as a society, I don't think we have put as much focus or as much importance on sleep as we should.
Right. And I think you can even add to that. It's more of habit development. So, what are your habits that are preventing you or helping you fall asleep? Do you have some sort of routine? And if you can apply this to anything, do you have study habits that can get you in the sort of like quote unquote in the zone? What are your habits to eat a healthy diet, or to not overeat, or to make sure you're eating enough? So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Just out of curiosity, I'm not the person who can just, close their eyes and fall asleep instantly. For me, I need to wind down for like an hour, kind of dumb my brain out, or read a book or something. What did you do when you were working so that you could fall asleep relatively quickly, or at least, stay asleep or sleep in a little bit? Because I'm awful at sleeping in. Like, I'm so used to getting up at such a regimented time, between 5 and 6 a.m., that even if I were to go to bed at 3 a.m., I would still wake up at 5 or 6.
I've never had any problem falling asleep or staying asleep. I've always had a problem waking up. I do really well in the morning. Once I get going, you would think I was a morning person, but as long as I'm in bed, I can stay and sleep forever. And I think this is because of years and years and years of sleep deprivation. Growing up in the 90s in Mexico, with a Nintendo and a TV in my room, probably was the worst thing that you could do for a kid, because I have horrible sleep habits. A lot of times, if I don't have anything to do the next day, and there's a show that I want to watch, like for example, I'm watching The Assassination of Gianni Versace. Super interesting show. It's creepy as hell. If I don't have to go to work the next day, I kind of like I'm the bad influence, and I ask Megan to, hey, let's watch one more. Let's watch one more, and we stay up until 2 a.m. watching nonsense. I'm really bad at that. I'm really bad at being responsible with my sleep. But once I hit the bed, I'm in bed, and I fall asleep super fast, and you can't wake me up. Now, my room is completely blacked out. I have aluminum foil over my windows, and I keep my
Oh my God.
yeah, no, totally, dude. In fact, okay, for anyone that's living in an apartment, this is what I did. I went to the store and bought butcher paper, and I lined my windows with butcher paper, so when you look from the outside in, it just looks white. So it looks like I just have regular curtains. And then I put a layer of aluminum foil behind it. I keep my bedroom on the colder side. Sometimes I run a fan, sometimes I don't, and I sleep. Another thing that I did is I bought, basically my sheet, and then I have a duvet, and the duvet is almost like heavy, and having that pressure over me kind of helps me fall asleep faster. It's easier for me to fall asleep with that weight on my body than if I just had a single sheet. I don't know if there's anything to it. I've read a couple of studies on kids with autism wanting that pressure all over their bodies and having that pressure making them calmer. So maybe that is, something that if you can't fall asleep, maybe adding a little bit of weight to your covers could help you fall asleep faster.
Yeah, I'm definitely the type of person who loves a frozen room, but being like snuggled underneath all the blankets. It doesn't make any sense, but it's so comfortable for me.
Yeah, it's this is that's how I sleep, and I fall asleep super fast, and I stay asleep. Now with a big asterisk, okay, like a hospital has to function 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So what about people that are doing a service to society and have to work those overnight shifts? Maybe that's when you start becoming like super protective of your sleep, super protective of your diet. Maybe put in your time, and maybe those overnight shifts should be cyclical, where maybe you do 3 months out of the year, and everyone has to volunteer and do 3 months out of the year where they do the overnights and then rotate. I don't know how we're gonna fix that. That's one, and that's like reason number 672 that I decided to become a naturopath, because I've never had to do an overnight shift at a hospital. And I imagine that if I had to do a stint overnight, my weight would just double. I don't know, if Dr. Rob Abbott is listening, man, more power to you, because I know he's doing GYN right now overnights, and we've had a couple of conversations, in text conversations at late hours, and he's like, dude, I can't, I gotta go get some shut eye right now because I don't know when I'm gonna deliver my next kid.
Right, right, right. Yeah, at least for what I do, like you were saying before about the glucose dysregulation, if I do an all-nighter, I'll make sure I get some form of exercise that day after doing my essentially all-nighter. So if, I'll take my exam and then once classes are all done, whether it's, a nice just slow walk or cycle somewhere just to sort of mitigate that response. It's definitely not something you want to do long term. It's just sort of like you were saying, sort of managing that stress. It's just one way to sort of lessen the impact of something. And then, I'm not doing anything excessively intense. It's just something to, try to just mitigate any sort of damage from staying up all night.
And we should be resilient, we should be resilient enough and healthy enough that an overnighter, an all-nighter is not going to wreck us for 6 months. We should be resilient, and we should be able to do these things sporadically without any major ill effects. The problem is that we are not healthy. We're not healthy enough to be putting our bodies through that. And when you want to become a doctor, when you want to become a practitioner, it is a sacrifice that you are going to take to earn the responsibility of treating other people. So that's why I could never be the type of student that was like, oh, what I know, and that's enough. No, I wanted to be on top of my shit out of respect for the people that now I'm treating. But we should be resilient enough, and we should, having an all-nighter should not make us type 2 diabetic immediately. But any stressor, any hormetic stressor, even as low as it is, will accumulate. And in the long term, it can be the starting point for maybe an autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, or any sort of those nebulous illnesses that a lot of people have.
If anybody who knows of Dr. Rhonda Patrick, she had Dr. Sachin Panda on her podcast, and he posts quite a bit of really interesting research on circadian clocks and sort of circadian dysregulation and stuff like that, and how it impacts literally everything in your body. So if anybody who has a Twitter account, definitely look into the studies that he posts and sort of the work that he's doing. It's really just quite fascinating.
I think everyone knows, in a deeper level, that not sleeping affects you. But things like the sugar dysregulation, you start to push your circadian rhythm because your body wants to adapt to the new thing. And there are other things that push that circadian rhythm. Like, for example, if you decide to work out later in the evening, that can push your circadian rhythm after the exercise regimen or after the exercise session, and now your body wants to fall asleep a little bit later. Same thing with eating later during the day. That kind of shifts the circadian rhythm. I know Rob Wolf has talked about his intermittent fasting window. Instead of what I do is I have like a dinner around 9, and then I don't eat until the next day until around 1 p.m., which gives me a 16-hour window of fasting. He started doing that, and then he realized that eating later can push your circadian rhythm. So now what he does is he has a big breakfast and a later lunch slash dinner around 4 p.m., 5 p.m., and he doesn't eat again until the next morning, and that gives him like a 16-hour fasting window. He was just messing around with that to see if he could see an easier time hitting the pillow and going to bed. I know that if I have a patient that complains of insomnia or complains about not being able to fall asleep quickly, do a couple of interventions, like for example meditation, trying to have a sleep ritual. And what I mean by that is like 30 minutes before they go to bed, doing a cup of tea, something like lemon balm, or even like some natural calm, 30 minutes before going to bed, getting that warm liquid, and magnesium is relaxing, maybe taking a bath, starting a meditation practice. So using an app like Headspace to start training how to meditate, and that kind of wind down, like you were saying, that kind of easing into the sleeping window, it's going to make it better for my patients to fall asleep. Now, it goes back to what you had mentioned about habits being important. Adam, I'm going to ask you, in the past year, how many times have you forgotten to brush your teeth?
Hmm. Um, to be honest, I'm pretty good with teeth brushing, but I've definitely more times than I can count, which is kind of gross.
It is so rare for a person to say, "Oh shit, I forgot to brush my teeth." And you might be, how many times do you lay down and you're like about to fall asleep and you go, "Oh shit, I forgot to brush my teeth." You actually get up and go brush them. And it's not because it is this evolutionary adaptation to put a brush in our teeth or anything like that. It's because it's a habit, and it's a habit that it's so ingrained in our brain. We basically go through the motions. You're about to go to bed. Okay, I'm gonna brush my teeth. I'm gonna go to bed. You wake up. Okay, I'm about to drink some coffee. I'm gonna brush my teeth, and then you go on with your day. It's like your day doesn't start up until you put that paste into your teeth and you brush them.
If you ever read the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think in that book he explains sort of how that habit came to be. In that there was one guy who was selling toothpaste, and it was the creation of that habit of needing to brush your teeth and feeling clean is actually what got toothpaste to sell.
And it's not like you see posts on Facebook that say, "Did you fall off the wagon on brushing your teeth? Let's have a brush your teeth challenge. So for the next 30 days, we're going to brush our teeth." No, brushing your teeth, it's so ingrained that we don't fall off the wagon. We don't forget. Why can't we have the same habit formation with something as simple as eating clean, or having a sleep ritual, or having an exercise program? Why are we do we have such a hard time doing those healthy habits that everyone knows that we should be doing, and we're just not doing it? And it's probably a couple of things. It's probably because brushing your teeth is pretty damn simple, and it takes what, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Going to your gym and putting a workout, especially if you have to drive somewhere, it will take an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's hard to carve that time from your day and quote unquote sacrifice that time, even though it's a healthy habit. So that's why, a sleep ritual is so powerful, because we are creatures of habit. We have to make so many decisions every day. Imagine if you had to make a decision in everything from like, okay, I'm going to step with my right foot and then my left foot. And then, I'm going to put on the shirt and I'm going to do left hand today first and then the right arm. And it would be so overwhelming and it would just fry our brains. Because we have a habit of putting clothes on, it becomes automatic and the body doesn't need to make that decision. So if you start making a habit, 9 o'clock, or that's when you turn off the lights, turn off the TV, and you get the water boiling for your natural calm, your body just goes through the motions, and before you know it, you're going to be able to fall asleep faster. So we've spent some time on this topic that we didn't even plan to talk about. But one topic that we did plan to talk about was ketogenic diets, because we keep seeing this popping up on our feeds. And I just want to talk about how we can use a ketogenic diet. Spoiler alert, the most important thing is going to be context. So Adam, have you ever tried a ketogenic diet?
No,
The concept of eating nothing but fat doesn't excite you?
it does not. No, I'm not one to kind of dive into sort of extremes when it comes to diet. I think first and foremost, food should be enjoyed. I think it should be enjoyed not only in taste, but with the people you eat with, how you eat. I think whatever diet works for you is great. There has just been no sort of, calling, for lack of a better term, for me to want to consume that diet.
And that's fair. I don't want to scapegoat this and say, oh, everything in moderation. I look at diets as tools, and there are three scenarios that come to my mind where a ketogenic diet can be useful. But in reality, any diet can be useful. So, like, for example, weight loss would be one of the reasons why someone might want to use a ketogenic diet as a tool. The second would be therapeutic advantage of a ketogenic diet. And then the third one, and that this is the one that people don't think about, would be more like convenience. And it is very convenient to have the metabolic flexibility in order to go 12 hours, 24 hours without eating. and it sounds crazy, but doing it while on a ketogenic diet, it's actually really simple to skip meals.
I've heard that from actually a lot of people who have fiddled around with diets. Some people just said that they just had absolutely no appetite after being on the diet for a little while. They just had to actually physically remind themselves to eat because they just would not eat, which was I found was kind of odd.
Well, one of the reasons is that ketones can be a little bit nauseating. So you have like this underlying nausea. It's really hard for you to eat. And that's one of the reasons why people go into the quote unquote keto flu. When you start converting and you start actually utilizing ketones, you actually lose your appetite. Now, there is a paradoxical effect in some people, and it has to do with insulin utilization, where a ketogenic diet actually makes them uber hungry. And in order for them to be satiated, they have to have some carbs to spike insulin a little bit, and then that actually cuts that feedback. But I'm gonna put a link on the show about an article that my friend Billy Mitchell wrote about this with one of his patients that he wanted to do a ketogenic diet, but he was ravenous all the time, and actually adding a potato at the end of the night helped curb his hunger. So that's kind of interesting. But I don't, that's in very rare cases. So one of the major advantages of being on a ketogenic diet when we're talking about convenience is that once you're past the point of achieving metabolic flexibility, it is very easy for you to skip meals. That's a convenience that I took advantage of while I was going through medical school, because I can just drink coffee and have the whole morning without needing to break to go have some food and break my fast. So it was very easy for me to just get up in the morning, brush my teeth, of course, because that's a habit that is very ingrained in me, and then get dressed and go to school, and I didn't have to worry about frying some eggs or making some oatmeal. This ability to have metabolic flexibility and being able to use ketones in your body leads into the second reason why you could use a ketogenic diet as a tool, and that's losing weight. So if you followed my little explanation on why you could probably have less hunger in a ketogenic diet, that explains why ketogenic diets are so useful for weight loss in some cases, because you spontaneously reduce calories. Now, maybe I'm going to get some hate from this. Maybe people, are past the idea that calories don't matter, because calories do matter. And if you spontaneously reduce calorie intake, you will lose weight. And this is with every single type of diet. I talk about, going paleo and then not knowing a lot about how to make a paleo dinner or whatever. So you default to meat and veggies, and you cut all the processed crap, and you're snacking less, and you maybe are transitioning into a little bit of metabolic flexibility, and you spontaneously cut calories. And then you start learning about paleo pizza and paleo brownies, and now you're eating more processed foods that are more calorie dense, and now that calorie deficit is gone, and now you start gaining weight again. Same thing with the ketogenic diet. Because you're excluding carbohydrates completely from your diet, or maybe not completely, but maybe 25 grams a day, or let's say less than 50 net carbs a day, you tend to stay away from processed food. And because of the ketone effect on your body, and getting a little bit of nausea, and maybe dropping a lot of water weight, because of the aldosterone cortisol regulation, because all of that, now you start losing weight. And if you pair that calorie deficit with some good sleep and some good workouts, then a ketogenic diet could be the tool that is going to finally allow you to reach your weight goal. One disclaimer: this is not to say that this is the only way to achieve weight loss. It could be a tool for some people to be able to lose weight.
So I've got two questions. One would be, people think of the sort of classic ketogenic diet as this diet that's super high in fat, and like you were saying before, only like 10 to 25 grams of carbohydrates. But I've seen some people who are eating a significantly higher amount of carbohydrate content, within, 100 plus grams, and they're still able to maintain their ketosis. As with everything, there's a ton of individuality with it, it seems like. I just wanted to know what your take was on sort of this, ketogenic diet may not necessarily be this severe restriction on carbohydrate content to be so low that you're only eating 10 to 25 grams, where maybe for some people, they might eat, 200 grams of carbohydrates and still be in ketosis.
So a big caveat, or let's talk about a little bit of history of diets, and let's talk about a little bit of ideals and ways to approach this diet. So I came to the paleo community through a book called Good Calorie, Bad Calorie by Gary Taubes. Back then, it was pretty much everyone had some hunch that calories didn't matter. It was about what type of calorie and the insulinic response, the hormonal response of your body to that calorie, that was important. Thanks to people like Stephen Guyenet and all of the different researchers that have kind of disproven the fact that calories don't matter, we now know that, the hormonal response to calories is very important. But calories do matter, and food quality matters, and everything matters. It's just about what is the best approach for you to spontaneously reduce calories in order to be able to achieve your goal weight. So back to your question, I am a big fan of the work that Luis Villaseñor is doing at Keto Gains. With the Keto Gains program, the mantra is don't chase ketones, chase results. And the transformation stories that come out of Keto Gains on a day-to-day basis are incredible. And what Luis is doing, he has a macro calculator where you go in and you say, okay, what's my goal? What is the thing that I want to achieve? I know we talked about exercise versus training and how no one likes to exercise like a hamster, just driving to the gym and running on a treadmill. People like to train, so if you set a goal, like for example, I want to run a 5K, and you set up a calendar and you're trying to achieve that goal, that's going to be way more motivating than getting to your car and then randomly selecting a speed on the treadmill and running for 20 minutes and then doing some exercise or whatever. Training is more important than exercise. Same thing with your diet. What is your goal? If you don't have a clear goal, then you're just going to randomly do things and never achieve any results. So you go to his website, ketogains.com, and you select, I want to have some weight loss, or maybe you want to build some muscle, or maybe you want to get stronger, or maybe you want to get leaner. So first and foremost, what's your goal? When you put in your goal, then he gives you a plan with different macronutrient goals. Okay, if you're trying to lose weight, you're going to be undercaloric. You're going to have a deficit, and that deficit is going to help you attain that goal. Now, while you're undercaloric, he doesn't expect you to get stronger. He doesn't expect you to tone or whatever that means. For that amount of time, you're going to be trying to lose fat. And you can achieve that whether you're eating 150 grams of carbs or 10 grams of carbs, as long as you maintain a hypocaloric state. The advantage of being in a more ketogenic style approach, as I said before, is because you're going to burn some fat, and then you're going to be able to utilize some of those ketones, and that's going to allow you to have no hunger. Now, if you change your goal and you say, I want to build muscle, those carbohydrates actually go up, because now you're going to have to train really hard in order to prevent that calorie surplus to becoming fat. So, with that caveat, you're going to have to work out hard. And when he means working out, he means like lifting weights or doing some high intensity glycolytic type of exercise. So one of the biggest things, and going back to his chase results, is that he doesn't have you tracking glucose. He doesn't have you tracking ketones. He doesn't make you track any of those things, because it really doesn't matter. I was talking to Keith Norris, who has been doing this approach to diet and exercise for almost for a year now, and he says that he checks his ketones, and he'll be at like 0.3 to 0.5 throughout the day, and it really doesn't matter. He's still getting stronger and leaner. Where some people get so focused in having high ketone levels in their blood that they're more interested in checking that ketone level than tracking their calories. So they're trying to control a physiological process that from person to person is completely random, and it's going to be activated at different speeds in a spectrum throughout the day. It's like someone that is like wanting to get to work, and they're just looking at the traffic instead of getting in their car and actually driving to work, and they're looking at the traffic and they're trying to predict when is the best time to leave, and they're just sitting there, refreshing Google Maps, trying to see when the traffic changes. That's what it is like with changing, with tracking your ketones, unless you take exogenous ketones. And if you take exogenous ketones, then the ketones are going to go up. But every damn time you're taking an exogenous ketone, you are adding more calories into your body. And when you add calories into your body, that whole idea of being in a calorie deficit with ease goes out the window and doesn't give you results. So to me, if you're trying to get better body composition, if you're trying to get leaner, the ketogenic approach works because of convenience slash being able to automatically reduce calorie intake, which is the same reason why a fruitarian diet works in losing weight, because you are eliminating calories spontaneously. And that's why a program where you do a shake in the morning, a shake in the afternoon, and then dinner at night works, because you are, reducing calories. Or the HCG diet, which is one of the worst things to ever come out of this functional medicine movement, where, they inject you HCG, and then all of a sudden now you can, survive on 500 calories a day. And then people say, oh, I lost weight. Well, yeah, because maybe the placebo effect of having an injection puts your mind at ease and consuming a really low calorie diet.
For the people listening who don't know what the HCG is, do you want to explain that?
The human chorionogonotropic. My friend Devin, that's his favorite hormone. The human chorionic gonadotropin. And it's HCG gets released whenever a female gets pregnant. And the idea is they take this HCG hormone, the human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, and they inject you with it. And because I don't know why, I've never looked into it, that automatically reduces your hunger. And then they tell you, okay, so we injected you with HCG. Now we're going to have you eat 500 calories a day, and you should be fine. And make sure those calories are coming from greens and veggies. And then all of a sudden people lose weight. Like, no shit, you're only eating 550 calories a day. Now, for each one of those diets, which one is the diet that is going to provide you with all the vitamins and minerals and different amino acids for you to have a normal functioning life? It depends. Dr. Paul Jaminet, in his book, The Perfect Health Diet, makes a damn good argument about maybe obesity being driven by a lack of nutritionally dense foods. So we eat these empty calories in search for trying to get more and more nutrients, and we just keep eating and we don't get satiated until our micronutrient needs are met.
It's a saying, overfed and undernourished.
Totally, yeah, definitely. And if I was going to put into perspective, the approach that Luis Villaseñor is doing, the main focus of his Ketogains diet is actually not low carb. It's actually high protein, moderate amount of carbs, with some fat in there. So he's doing things right. The guy is brilliant. And if you haven't seen his work, check it out, because he is very level-headed, and it's not a cult. It's a very balanced approach with a ton of case studies that he's shown really good results. So that's the tool of using a ketogenic diet approach to weight loss or muscle building.
I have a second question. A lot of people, when they hear the ketogenic diet, they think it's this diet where you're just, essentially chugging olive oil all day and you're not getting any sort of nutrients. So I guess what I'm asking is, what's sort of your way of sort of busting this myth that a ketogenic diet lacks nutritional value?
That's where not focusing on your ketones plays a role. Because when you're just focusing on ketones, there's things that you can do to increase ketone production. For example, chugging MCT oil, or chugging exogenous ketones, or chugging olive oil. If you are not worried about what your ketone production is, then you start worrying about food quality. So how much protein do I need? I think he does 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So, getting some lean protein, and then he preaches about getting a ton of veggies as your main source of carbohydrate. So broccoli and asparagus and things like that, and then having the fat, be like sprinkled on top and not the driving force behind his diet.
Right, and I've looked at some of his work, and I don't know how correct this is, and I'm definitely not, saying this is a fact, but from what I've seen from his work, he suggests that if you're, experiencing that quote unquote keto flu, it could be down to sort of like an electrolyte type of problem or lack of salt.
Yeah, and he has a recipe for an electrolyte lemonade or something like that, where you use pickle juice and other electrolytes, and you make this mix and you drink it in the morning to help you. Because remember, when you drop glucose levels from the blood, your body doesn't have the necessity to have insulin circulating to push it out. So then cortisol regulation goes down. Cortisol and aldosterone go hand in hand. So aldosterone is what actually keeps sodium in your bloodstream. So a decrease in aldosterone, you actually start peeing out some of the sodium. So then your blood volume kind of lowers, which lowers your blood pressure, which is a good thing. But if you're not used to having low levels of sodium in your blood, you're going to feel like crap and you're going to be a little bit dehydrated. So adding this electrolyte mix, and it's pretty cool because, pickle juice has a lot of salt and a lot of different things. Is going to increase your blood volume again, and you're going to feel a little bit better. And that really helps with what people call the carb flu. And interestingly, Adam, he suggests that if you are moving from the weight loss approach to the muscle building approach, to add dextrose to your electrolyte mix.
Is there a reason for the dextrose as opposed to just increasing overall carbohydrate content of the diet?
Yes, because he wants you to take this after a workout to nourish your muscles, because you're going to be the most insulin sensitive after a workout. So then you add the dextrose, and basically just that all that glucose goes right into your muscles, and you get bigger.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So you wouldn't think that the keto guy, is suggesting to add dextrose to his drink rather than ketones, and he has no use for ketones. Unless your reason for going on a ketogenic diet is cognitive improvements or TBI, or you're trying to fight some level of insulin resistance that has affected your brain in the form of like Alzheimer's or things like that. But that's a very different reason to go into a ketogenic diet. And when you do, if you are doing a ketogenic diet for improvement in cognition, or maybe reducing incidence of epilepsy, or maybe trying to help feed a brain that has traumatic brain injury, now that's when you start worrying about the amount of ketones in your blood. But for the average bear who is listening to this podcast and is not interested, they want to look better in a bikini, the measuring of ketones is not as important. If you want to be on a therapeutic ketogenic diet for the aforementioned reasons, then you have to make the sacrifice of, how are you going to achieve this level of ketosis? Because like you said, some people can have 100, 150 grams of carbs and still remain ketogenic. And Chris Masterjohn a couple of months ago posted a blog post on how you can eat rice and maintain ketosis if you dump a bunch of oil on the rice. Yeah, so you can like, let's say you are keto adapted and you don't want to lose the momentum and you want to continue having the ketones producing energy, then you can add olive oil to a bowl of rice and you can stay as ketogenic as if you hadn't had any glucose. And this can be a hack for someone that wants to do some long distance running or some but for the average person, just having ketones in your blood doesn't mean shit. It's more important to chase those results and not chase what your breath is when you're blowing into a keto meter, or what your level of ketones in your blood are, um, unless you have a very, very distinct goal of trying to prevent brain injury. And if that's the case, I'm not the expert on that, but people like Dominic D'Agostino, I know JJ Virgin was talking about her experience with her son. He had an accident, and she's using a ketogenic approach to help him. So that's more of a therapeutic approach to ketones, or like cancer. Some cancers um, respond really well to a ketogenic diet. Uh, but the more we learn about this, some cancers actually get woken up and they get more rampant with a ketogenic diet. So, some cancers feed on ketones. So it's just really hard, to try to say that one approach fits everything.
From what I've seen is that there's a decent amount of research behind a ketogenic diet for epilepsy and seizures. Is there a substantial amount for things like TBI or cognitive issues or anything like that?
Well, I know that in my head, at least, it makes sense that if you have some insulin resistance and, your body is not, readily using carbohydrates or sugar to feed, because you've messed up your systems, and the cells are not accepting any more sugar, or your pancreas is burnt. It makes sense in my head that since the brain can function to a certain degree with ketones, and your heart can function to a certain degree with ketones, it makes sense to me that trying to push the level of ketosis, being able to activate parts of the brain that maybe were not activated in the past. I, for one, whenever I'm fasting, I feel clarity, cognitive clarity. I was explaining to one of my patients that not a lot of people know the difference between being hungry and being hangry, or having that dip in their glucose where they get shaky. And actually being hungry feels good. Having a little bit of that ghrelin release, and that also releases some human growth hormone. It actually feels good. It feels like motivating. And I think having a little bit of drop in calories in your body, saying, hey, it's time to eat, and having that rumbling in your stomach, it feels good. But on the contrary, if you're not keto adapted, or if you don't have that metabolic flexibility, having that dip in sugar can feel like hell, because I used to get hangry all the time, and I don't get hangry anymore. So it makes sense that, having a little bit more ketone production, or this alternative fuel being produced, in your body, being able to tap into that resource, especially after years and years of bad eating and only being exposed to one source of fuel, can be helpful. Again, not an expert on cognition and ketogenic diets, but personally it makes sense. But I haven't really looked at the research.
All right, fair enough.
It's totally understandable that whenever something hits the web, and a lot of people are doing it, it's totally understandable to think that this is the end all be all, until the next big thing comes around. A couple of weeks ago, I actually came across a paper on fructose metabolism, and it was a pretty cool paper. And I sent it to all my friends, and it's been around the web, a couple of times, and a couple of people reposted it and whatever. And it was about how everything we sort of assumed or knew about fructose, it's almost like incorrect, because we assumed that fructose was completely utilized by the liver, or was processed by the liver. And in fact, after this paper came out, and I'll put up a link on the about the paper on the show notes, it shows that the small intestine actually takes the blunt work out of processing fructose. And after the small intestine gets saturated, that's when the liver takes over.
I remember when you sent me this paper, and it was a really cool paper, and we geeked out about it for a little while.
I'm going to get Adam to kind of do a 10,000-foot view overview of the paper, and then I'm going to go in and talk about it as he goes. So Adam, take it over, man.
All right. So in this study, it was published in the Journal of Cell Metabolism, and it was called "The Small Intestine Converts Dietary Fructose into Glucose and Organic Acids." And basically, what these researchers did was they force-fed mice essentially high fructose corn syrup. They gave them a 1-to-1 mixture of fructose to glucose, and high fructose corn syrup is a 55 to 45 ratio of fructose to glucose, so not exactly high fructose corn syrup, but pretty close. And what they found was that the majority of the fructose ended up being converted to glucose before it actually went to the liver. And they found that there was sort of this dose where there was a spillover effect. So the danger was in the dose with the amount of fructose that the small intestine could absorb. And what they said was that high doses of fructose greater than or equal to 1 gram per kilogram can essentially overwhelm the intestinal fructose absorption, causing spillover to the liver. However, smaller amounts, such as half a gram per kilogram, almost 90% get cleared by the small intestine. So, Guillermo, what would the implications of this be?
Well, to me, it answers the question about fruitarian diets, and how we can see that people that have non-alcoholic liver disease can go on a fruitarian diet and actually reverse that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease happens when you are eating so much crap that your liver gets overwhelmed, and then it turns, it gets congested, in layman's terms, gets congested and starts producing too many fatty acids, too many triglycerides, and they get stuck on your liver. So before this paper was published, it was published in February of this year, everyone assumed that any amount of fructose would directly go into your liver and start causing damage. But that doesn't explain why people can exist eating nothing but fructose and actually reverse fatty liver disease. But this explains it. And the major takeaway is this: eating an apple or eating a piece of fruit is not going to basically saturate your small intestine, and you're going to be able to process that piece of fruit naturally and normally without having to rely on your liver. On the other hand, I think you made the calculation, Adam, and it was a can of soda.
Right. So someone who was 130 pounds, if they were able to, have everything functioning normally and they could clear that half a gram per kilogram, it would be around a 500 milliliter can of Coke. So, half a liter. I mean, that's a lot of soda. So, you shouldn't even be drinking that in the first place.
Not where I'm come from, dude. In the valley in Mexico, half a liter of soda is what you get with your meal. So now imagine, that's the takeaway. So 1 can of soda is 366 milliliters. That's 12 ounces. So basically, a can and a half of soda would saturate your intestine, and any other fructose after that would have to be taken up by the liver. So imagine, like you're drinking a 20-ouncer, which is a can and a half. Now, if everything is working right, assuming everything is working right, any other fructose that you take after that 20-ouncer of Mountain Dew or whatever would have to be processed by your liver, because of the content of supraphysiological fructose that is in a can of soda or a bottle of soda. Now, on the other hand, if you were to eat the fructose levels that people have evolved with in the form of a prepackaged banana or an apple or an orange, that, because of the fiber, because of the vitamins, and and everything, and because it's not as saturated with fructose as high fructose corn syrup, your body is going to be able to process it normally and is not going to impact your liver function, which is fascinating.
Right, and also, there's a few caveats. This research was done in mice, and humans aren't mice, so we can't just directly, translate these results to us. But it's still, something to think about, and that there's this, danger in the dose. So we're not saying you can never, drink soda ever again, but just, be mindful that, you shouldn't maybe, if you had a can of soda earlier in the day, maybe don't have another two later on in the day, or whatnot. Again, this was done in rats, or mice rather, and we don't know the direct implications that this would have in humans.
Within some circles of health, we automatically say, oh, fructose is the devil. And the reasoning is because it's processed in the liver and it's going to lead to fatty liver disease. I think the bigger takeaway that I took from this paper was, if we have multiple ways of dealing with fructose, as in we can deal with it in our liver, we can deal, mainly dealt in the small intestine. I think that the takeaway is that maybe fructose is not as dangerous as we thought it was, and it could be part of a balanced diet, and we shouldn't be afraid of eating a piece of fruit every once in a while, because there's a lot of people that enjoy eating fruit. Maybe the biggest takeaway is, if you want to have some fructose, have it in physiological doses of less than 0.5 was it milligrams per kilogram?
The range was half a gram to a gram per kilogram. So that 500 milliliter can of Coke would be to someone who's 130 pounds on the upper end, because 130 pounds is roughly 60 kilos.
Yeah. So if you want to have some fruit, make sure a couple of things. Make sure that you're eating, that you're not a vacuum cleaner and you're eating, a whole pineapple on your own. But maybe a piece of fruit could be part of a healthy,
Oh, I don't even think it's a question. It could be.
It is.
A
Eating
piece of fruit could
yeah.
be. It definitely is. Yeah, like there's definitely nothing wrong eating fruit in your diet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is me talking, with, like, when I was talking to people like Ari Whitten and you. Every time, like, I would write, I would have to, like, go back and say, and make sure that I didn't say the liver processed fructose. Like, it's so ingrained in my brain that the liver processes fructose that is like changing your language. But eating, fructose is part of a normal diet, as long as you're not eating supraphysiological doses, like, for example, high fructose corn syrup, or even worse, agave syrup. There's some agave syrups that are 90% fructose. So reaching that threshold with an agave syrup is going to be way faster and at a lower dose than if you're eating a piece of fruit. Now, the big question is, there's a lot of people that have trigger foods that maybe we need to stay away from. Like, for example, if you put a bag of chips in front of me, I'm going to eat the whole bag of chips. And maybe there are some people out there that eating fruit is what triggers them into overeating. So be careful, don't try to excuse your addiction to eating, a bunch of fruit, and eliminating your calorie deficit by quoting this paper. But if you know that you cannot control yourself with the sweetness of apples or mangoes or whatever, maybe you avoid them for that reason. But if you are a healthy individual with good digestion, that you shouldn't be worried about your liver if you're eating physiological amounts of fructose. Well, my man, it's an hour and a half. Usually, something happens in these episodes, and we just talk forever and ever. I'm ready to go eat some fructose now and some ketones. I'm just gonna have a bowl of fructoketones because I want my liver to be covered in fat.
Well, I'm gonna go enjoy some tacos.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, yeah. Just you do that, man. So nice to have you, Adam. As usual, visit my website. We're gonna put all this links on the show notes, and I'll talk to you soon, man.
It's always a pleasure. Have a good one, Guillermo.
Thanks, man.